Hello and welcome to another episode of Connecting with Kinetic. I'm your host, Jake, and today I'm joined by Gus/Gustas/Big G, head of ecosystem and BD at the Stargate Foundation. How are you, Big G?
Doing great. The end of summer, doing fantastic. Been seeing a lot of traction in different ecosystems. Very excited to be in crypto today.
I'm very excited about the end of summer. I don't know if you've noticed my complexion, but I'm not exactly what you would call a sun person.
Yeah.
Does that? So that doesn't surprise you at all?
No, I don't know. It depends on your hobbies. You know, where you like to spend time, or like what's your holiday destination? What you like to do?
When I take a holiday, I go. I'm working on my computer all day. I'm like, man, that's tough. Close out all that stuff, and then I get back on my computer. And I open different applications that are more fun applications. So, for me, it's a big shift when I go on vacation. Is there somewhere you like to go?
Particularly, I really enjoy Europe. So I think just a couple of weeks ago, I spent some time in Italy. Was really refreshing. But mainly Europe. I haven't traveled so much outwards to other continents, apart from, job description where you go for a conference, explore a culture for a week, but you're being so busy meeting with a lot of new people. So it's always, you don't have too much time to explore a city or a country. So always, noting good places where to go. And then next time when an opportunity appears to go on like free time, then definitely gonna go back and then, experience in a different way.
I've actually never left the good old US of A. I've not traveled much at all, as maybe my ideal vacation would tell you. It must be nice to be able to move around Europe because it's just like so much smaller. It's like if I want to go somewhere that looks different, I have to go 500, 600, 700 miles.
Yeah, and that becomes 5-hour flight, right? From time to time.
And if there's any kind of delays, it's I don't know if you know this, but the US is pretty big.
It is. Yeah, I experienced that myself. Yeah.
I think half of it's highways.
Could be. Could be. I think a lot of lobbyism happened for cars during certain periods of cities being built up. Yeah.
I don't know how much you've explored outside kind of the big cities, but it is not planned to facilitate walking, which may come as a surprise that we're one of the most obese countries. It's almost as if we're incentivized to only sit.
Yeah, I'll probably refrain from making a comment here. But yeah, I think having a walk, I think it really opens up your mind a bit sometimes when we have exploring different new ecosystems. So sometimes you just need to recollect your thoughts. So walking for me is doing a lot of wonders recently.
Yeah, no, I love going for a walk. Luckily, I have a big suburban hellscape that I can walk in with a bunch of the same houses repeated over and over again. I think we might be getting a bit off topic.
We are.
Which is not exactly strange for this particular podcast. So Can you tell me a little bit about Stargate in general and how you approach your role there?
Surely. Absolutely. So I think I'll kick it off from personal side since we're having a very natural conversation here. So I joined Stargate 8 months ago, joined as in the role to lead the ecosystem for Stargate. When I joined, I probably knew couple of things about the bridging landscape. I knew a bit about DeFi, a bit about traditional finance, and quite a bit more about on-chain data and how to work with the data. And when I joined Stargate, I was amazed by how a big ecosystem it is. It's both from the chain relationships, from the foundation teams that are looking to have a bridge deployed to allow users bridging stable coins and ETH, to the level of more granular level where you go into an ecosystem, you have different versatile categories like lending borrowing protocols, DEXs, LRTs, LSTs, and what else not is being built up in this DeFi world. Meeting all of these ecosystems, once we deploy a Stargate bridge, also getting introduced to these teams, it's always a very fascinating experience because you get to explore why they chose that particular chain, why they do like it. Of course, there's sometimes some politics, maybe some economic value there, but I always see, I always notice, why people do, what's the emotion for them being in that ecosystem? If they get enough support from that foundation team, do they have enough, if everything what they need is there for them to build and explore their creativity, that's I think an important part for building strong and very sustainable ecosystems. And coming back to what Stargate is in general, it was born on a thesis of bridging stablecoins, bridging native assets across strong ecosystems, most dominant ecosystems, initially Optimism, Ethereum, Arbitrum base. And Stargate V1 always operated until 14 to 15 chains, where we hit some walls with scalability. That's when we really hit into the trenches to build out what Stargate V2 is. And it allowed us and helped us unlock new level of scalability, where currently Stargate right now sits on 29 chains and we're growing. Sometimes 2 a week, sometimes single a week. But once we do deploy to that ecosystem, it's also how do we introduce ourselves to the ecosystem dApps? How do we give the most support? Maybe there's some dApps that want to go on the chain and use Stargate as this composable Lego where it can help them to do that with liquidity in mind, and as well as the layer 0 aspect of it all is also very important in the way Stargate operates and functions.
Do you have a kind of favorite early chain or early altcoin personally?
Personally, I think a chain which is really unique and very interesting. I think all of them have very interesting edges and how they operate. I do I think, Flare, Stay ecosystem. Flare particularly because of the support we receive from the foundation team. Say equivalently the same. And I mean, from every single team that we've been talking to, everyone is super friendly, and we all come into a meeting and everybody's working on ideas, how to make it better, how to attract more liquidity, how to bootstrap that liquidity, how to make it sticky within that ecosystem. How do we grow collaboratively together, trying not to steal from others, but how do we onboard new users and bring in fresh liquidity into that specific ecosystem? So I don't think you can really, isolate and pick one particularly. I think I love them all. There's just sometimes, ones are bigger than the others. So sometimes it's hard to get the attention. So you kind of sometimes prioritize the smaller ones where you probably need to win more, and the bigger ones kind of work on themselves and, they kind of work out themselves. But yeah.
Well, you kind of went into my next question, which is what has the relationship with Flare been like? I mean, you say it's good, kind of to expand on that. We know LayerCake is now kind of struck off the future development. That was a big announcement for a lot of people. So what was Stargate's role in kind of that decision?
In joining Flare or deploying the bridge right to Flare. I think that's part of something what Stargate V2 is, and what I mentioned before about the scalability. So on the Stargate V1 was always operating between these single-sided liquidity pools where liquidity providers deposit capital, thus enabling more depth and then allowing deeper bridging between let's say 2 chains. And what we built out with Stargate V2, which unlocked us this scalability where we're able to expand. Right now, I think we're on 10 Hydra chains, and we call this Hydra, where it's a short term, but we think of it as bridging as a service to a new ecosystem that would treat Stargate as the canonical bridge. And on Flare, as opposed to let's say if there is a path between Ethereum and Optimism and somebody is bridging 10,000 USDC, so that user would lock in 10,000 USDC on Ethereum single-sided pool, and layer 0 message gets across, returns back the message, checking against the parameters, if there's enough funds in the destination pool, if the security checks out, and then unlocks the 10,000 on the Optimism pool, right? So it's using this lock and unlock method and using execution and verification by layer 0. With the Hydra bridging as a service concept, we essentially extend this wrapped version of USDC or USDT or wrapped ETH. And these unique asset contracts, for example, USDC, is built following Circle's guidelines, which both helps the ecosystem to essentially access liquidity and capital flow for users and traders and builders from 29 networks. But it also is an upgradable contract, right? Which in this kind of situation of Circle, when Circle wants to deploy native USDC on Flare, they can take over the USDC.E contract from Stargate, deploy the CCIP bridge, burn the USDC.E, and then introduce your native USDC, which is a very, very unique concept that not a lot of teams have it. And that allows us to scale and help, these new ecosystems to grow. The other part here is that Flare is a very exciting protocol, and there are a couple OFDs that have been introduced by Flare and different protocols they're building there, which also allows those particular tokens to go across to 80 networks that Layer 0 is on. And additionally, we make it live in the bridging UI of Stargate as well. So Flare was specifically very exciting, and I think the team was very excited to build with Stargate, and they were always thinking about ideas, very supportive, technical. They really understand what they're building. They have a very good strategy for the ecosystem, which makes the whole deployment very exciting and actually reasonable for Stargate as well.
Yeah, so I'm sure they, when they started talking to you, they were kind of like, wait a minute, we could save a lot of time.
Yeah, it does save a lot of time. And this particular aspect versus native asset, we call this bridging as a service, introduces these pre-native upgradable assets, right? It doesn't upgrade the smart contract, but it gives the ownership to the right teams to introduce the native stablecoins. So this really alleviates, the challenge for new ecosystems to, how do we kick off this ecosystem? How do we get access to these different networks? How do we make the flows happen? And Stargate 2 is very much positioned to help this escalate.
Well, I will do one further kind of big boy question. How will Stargate support FAssets? So how's that gonna, when that starts to roll out, how's that gonna look for users? I know everybody's really excited about it, but may not know exactly what shape that will end up taking.
Yeah, that's a good question. I partially know the full information, so I'll probably deviate to a more high-level answer here. But I think there's some information that is possibly available on the Flare Twitter page. Angus, who leads the Stargate Foundation, was invited to the spaces that Hugo Fillion was leading. So they talked a lot about the FAssets there. So I think I would direct the users to have the full kind of answer there. But with the FAssets, I think it's very, very unique, and Stargate is positioned to support them very well as well. We're very excited to see how they're gonna build it out, and the usability and extensibility to other chains and how it will work out. And Stargate, I think, is well positioned to also support this. Yeah, so I'll probably deviate to another question. I apologize, I didn't have all of the information here, but yeah, we split the time.
That's
a bit
okay.
Sometimes.
They probably will not read that. So let's make something up. It's going to be so good that you'll want to stick a fork, as we were talking about before this, stick a fork in an outlet.
And get energized, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, whether you want to or not, you will be getting energized.
Fantastic. That's what I mean. Flare is at the front of innovating. They're doing it pretty well, and we're super excited that it happens on Flare.
So how did you get pulled into this little insane asylum we call Web3?
Yeah, I think the short story would be, I initially, bent down towards becoming an architect, and later on wanted to become an urban planner. Spent some time working in municipality, then COVID hit, and I saw some patterns between urban planning and kind of decentralization versus centralization. And I saw that when a lot of the lockdown happened, a lot of people started looking for land or, to purchase some sort of real estate in the countryside, away from the city center, kind of moving away from the centralized, locale. So these patterns, I noticed them, and I started thinking a bit more where does this decentralization happen more and more? We often see it from the urban planning, but it's not only happening on the crypto side of things, right? So where we worship, the foundational values of crypto, censorship resistance, permissionlessness, right? Immutability at the same time. So these values also, I think, replicate in other fields that we sometimes get so zoned in into like, oh, it's only crypto wise. But if you do zoom out into other categories, we also see these things happening more around the world. And I think it's probably a product of, globalization, us being very much connected on a daily basis, driving a lot of economic value. But where is the value in internally? Like, how do we feel about this? And where do we want to take this forward?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have to live in a nasty city anymore because of job stuff, it's nice to live somewhere that's a little cleaner. So that makes
Right?
sense to have these, isolated little pockets.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, yeah, just noticing this, met a couple of my friends that I call now friends at that time. They were just acquaintances, but I met them in one festival during summer in Lithuania, and they were building out a product which was supposed to change the way the internet is routing around the world. It was really fascinating. They did a couple pivots, although, and then I think I spent 2 years, close to 2 years and a half, and then traveling around the conferences. And I until this moment, I really thank them, for, of course, it was business trips, but I was very much privileged to be in that spot to travel to, US for Consensus Permissionless, or to Asia for Token 2049, or any European conferences that were happening. And I got to see and meet more people, just to understand, like, where are the narratives being born? Like, who's talking about these things that I see online on Twitter or on YouTube or on any other spaces, or like, crypto outlets. And it started becoming more interesting. And I started get to know more people. So I started, speaking to founders, trying to get myself into have a actually fluent conversation, even though asking dumb questions, maybe shoot one good question. And over time, I met more and more people, and I think this brought me towards Stargate. And an opportunity landed, and I said, let's do it. Let's see where it takes me. Always eager to learn.
Well, you're definitely going to get a lot of that. I feel like time is very fast, but also slow in this ecosystem, because there's a lot of learning, a lot of I'll say 1 year feels like at least 3.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, it's a little rough. So if people would like to learn more about Stargate in regards to Flare or Stargate in general, where's a good place for them to go?
I think initially just exploring the UI. So Stargate.finance is a good direction that leads directly to the Stargate page. If you scroll all the way down and find a button for, documentation, that's also a good recommended spot to view what the technology is made up of and how the protocol works. There are a couple external, I would say, more deep dives into what Stargate V2 means. Recently, Angus, who leads the foundation, I think I mentioned that before, but he did a podcast with Arjun, who leads research at Li-Fi. They did a podcast around Stargate V2, what it means, how it's more capital efficient, what is Hydra. A lot of, I think, good bits there, a lot of good alpha. So definitely a spot to visit as well. Can drop a link here if it's necessary. You can probably clip it in the YouTube afterwards. Anywhere, I think we're very vocal on Twitter as well. Every time we launch a new chain or integrate a new chain, we always very vocal and support our teams that work with us and the teams that we work with. So these probably would be 2 good spots, couple and more spots.
All right. Well, my final question is there anything coming up fairly soon that excites you?
Definitely. I would say there's probably a keyword that would be bears. I just love bears, I don't know what else to say. Somehow, yeah, I got into loving bears. That's it. So, yeah.
I think that's a good note to end on. I thank you for your time, and it'll be nice to see if in the future, maybe when there's not so many of these lovable bears running around, how things change.
Agreed. Lovely to be on this call. Thank you for having me, Jake. It's great to meet you for the first time as well.
Of course.
You did well.
I think we did okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's. I'm really bad at ending these. So this is connecting with Kinetic.